So, my name is Laycook. I'm the former mayor of Kanab, Utah, and I've been asked to moderate this. That means I keep these guys in line over here. So, to give you a little background on how this came to be, this subject came to be, creating positive relationships between local art agencies and your local entities, such as your municipalities and counties and that type of thing. Let me tell you how this got to be. Last summer, the Utah Division of Arts and Museums team went around the state and they met with local art agencies, and they learned that there was a common problem they had, a common thread, and that was creating and sustaining relationships with their local municipalities and their counties and their school districts and that type of thing. And one of the issues was because those people, especially the elected officials, change, don't they, when there's an election, and they had to reestablish connections, and that got to be kind of a difficult thing. It was like starting all over. It's like getting a new neighbor, isn't it? So it gets to be kind of onerous. So, thanks for introducing you guys. These are all type A personalities, and they said, Nina, you get up there and start that. Okay. So, and naturally, when you have relationships with your local agencies like cities and counties and school districts, you depend on them to share resources such as facilities and perhaps personnel and funding and that type of thing. So it's real difficult if you have to reestablish that all the time. So, this session will provide various points of view on constructing and maintaining those positive and productive relationships. Now, our panelists, they've been selected from a deep pool of experts, and I have it on good authority that they were selected because they have all the answers. So, isn't that great? Let me introduce them. Here we have, right next to me here, we have Mary Ann Kirk. Mary Ann is the Cultural Arts Director of Murray Cultural Arts. And next to her, we have Randy Lewis, Mayor of Bountiful City, and next to him is Debbie Drake, President of Cedar City Arts Council. And this is how we're going to do it. I have a list of about 7 questions, which I'll pose to each one of them, and we can get their perspective. And we'll go through those questions and have those discussions, and leave the last 25 minutes for your questions, and they can answer them. And the hope is that you can come away with a strategic plan that you can put in place with your agency, okay? And I think probably the questions we have will probably help answer some of those questions, but if not, we'll have plenty of time afterwards to talk about those things.
Nina?
Yes.
Can I just make one comment?
Please.
I apologize for not being here to make the introduction, my fault. But the best thing you can ever do to learn how to work with municipalities is take the Change Leader Institute. 3 of these people are change leaders. Many in the room are change leaders. It talks about resistance, how to make it a positive thing. You learn so many skills. So that's my plug for the Change Leader.
Absolutely, Clive. It's invaluable, and you can even use some of those techniques at home, can't you? Don't tell my husband I said that. Okay, here's the first question, and we'll start this one with Mary Ann, and the next question we'll start with Randy, etc. You got that figured out? Yeah. Okay, first question. What led to your successful relationships with the local arts agency or local municipality?
Okay, I was part of the first established, what they called the Murray Arts Advisory Board. It was a volunteer group, and at the time, the city was having some struggles with an amphitheater that they felt was underutilized. And so the Arts Advisory Board talked how we could utilize that better, because that was a city need and it's something they'd spent money on. And so we came up with the idea of doing a combined series with all of our local arts groups that could provide a unified program. And so we started to run the Murray Arts in the Park in 1990, it had an immediate appeal. The city council, the municipality saw that we were meeting a need that they had, and that started a very strong initial collaboration with the city.
Yes.
You want want me to answer the same question?
Yes, please.
You know, I think, everything has to do with being an example from the top down. Being the mayor, you know, and the mayor before me, arts were very, very important to us. And I know that because of some situations in our city, our Art Davis Bountiful Arts Center got displaced to Farmington. And so for a couple of years, we didn't have art in Bountiful. And when I got elected a year and a half ago, the first meeting that I had after I was sworn in is I went directly to Emma Dugal and said, we want you back in Bountiful. We want to make sure that Farmington does not keep you. And I think I think that's important, that the city councils and the mayor, all the relationships that we have with art, they have to be positive and they have to be personal. If they're positive and they're personal, then everything else gets taken care of.
Thank you. Debbie.
We've been working really hard the last couple of years to revitalize the Cedar City Arts Council. And one of the things that we've worked really, really hard to do is to make sure that the city municipalities understand that we are a credible and vital organization. We've got a lot of committed people that have really gone out of our way to, when we say we're gonna do something, we do it, we follow through with it. We try to make every interaction very positive. We try to be transparent with our books and make sure that, you know, everything is above board and that we are very serious and very credible. And I think we've made big leaps and bounds for being recognized. I'm an artist, and artists sometimes are known to be a little bit flaky, so we go out of our way to make sure we're not flaky.
Thank you, Debbie. Next question. And we'll start with you, Randy, on this one. How do you handle challenges in these relationships when they arise?
Well, I think when we do have a challenge with art in Bountiful, it's almost always about funding, about how much funding we need and how much funding they want. And that relationship, because we have a personal relationship with these folks, and because we work together to solve the problems and overcome any barriers that we have, then somehow it works out because you have a good relationship. I mean, it has to have a good relationship to have it work out. And there has to be a give and take, because I think all of us want more money for the things that we do than sometimes is available.
And I agree with Randy that probably relationship building is one of the most important things that we can do between the municipality and the art council. But part of that is realizing that it takes time. You're not just gonna go in and this isn't gonna happen overnight. You need to go in and meet with them on a regular basis, get involved kind of in what they're doing. Sometimes you need to forgive people when they say something that maybe rubs you wrong, and you need to go back in with a positive attitude. So I think realizing what it takes to build relationships and just realizing that it's not gonna happen. Sometimes people make mistakes, go back in and don't give up on the process, and just keep going. Make it a long-term goal, not a short-term thing.
Well, and challenges can be a lot of different things. It could be with relationships, it can be money, it can be resources, whether it's facilities or whatever, and we've had all of those challenges. I think that once that you establish to me, the relationship with the people is your bottom level, and that they can trust what you're doing, and that they see when we did our Arts in the Park after 2 years, they could see it was successful, and it took a lot of time. In fact, it was basically the board and me and my family running the ticket booths and everything together, but they saw that it was successful and they valued it. And so then they started realizing, and I said to the mayor, you know, my family and I can't do this forever by ourselves. And if you want to sustain this and if you value this, then you need to come up with some resources, and, you know, that led to where I was hired as a staff person. The city hired a person to take care of the arts, and so I think that initial relationship was really important, and then when those challenges come, then you can try to troubleshoot, and you have a level of trust, although the extra challenge on that is when you have changing people, like you've established a good relationship with a mayor, and then I get a new mayor that isn't as supportive, so then you start that whole process over again of building that trust and finding how to get him involved or her involved in what you're doing. We actually, we had that happen, and I told the symphony and the band, and we do musicals every 3 years, I said, call up the mayor and ask him to be the narrator for your Peter and the Wolf program, and ask that, you know, I had him at every single youth musical, and all of the people were coming up to him and saying, we just love Murray, it's so cool you've got our kids involved in this. So he was getting all of the feedback that I didn't have to tell him, he was hearing it himself.
Excellent, that's a very good point. Stroke the ego, I think. The mayor mentioned something that we all need to be aware of. If you haven't served on a public board before, be aware of their budget cycles. If you're gonna go in with your project and you're ready to go for it, and they've already had their budget cycle and he doesn't have a line item in there that he can say, yeah, we've got funding here for you. Go in well in advance so they'll know what your timeline is and how much you need, that you do have a business plan. Don't tell him, oh, I just need 5,000. Tell him what your business plan is and what it's going to be used for, because he's gonna have to sell that to his fellow council members. And again, the timing, the budget cycle is so important. If you don't know what that is, go in and talk to the city manager or the clerk. They'll be glad to tell you. Good stuff. Next question. What is the best way to approach city or county leaders? This is a two-part question. And which what communication means provides the best success? The email or the phone call or in person?
We're talking about building relationships, and really the only way you're going to do that is in person and personal, but you also have to respect their time. I usually make a phone call and make an appointment to go sit down with whoever I want to talk to and talk to them personally. A personal invitation to something always gets more attention than an emailed invitation or something. So I don't think you can replace the in-person contact with something else. I think emails are good to give information out, a phone call to set something up, but I don't think you're ever gonna replace that personal meeting. And on that same kind of note, you've got the council people and the mayor that you wanna talk to, but probably the most important person to make really happy is the secretary. Because the secretary is going to determine whether you get that phone call through or you get to see the mayor, and they can really make or break that relationship. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, is the secretary's there too.
And I agree, the relationship part is really, really important. And for me, I'm in a smaller community. I did a lot of other things besides the arts, and so I was seeing them in other capacities, so they were literally my friends. And so, and that was city council, school board members, mayor, you know, people that I knew almost on a personal level, some better than others, but that relationship is real important. But once you can establish that where you feel comfortable, then the email becomes easier. And all of my board meetings, the city council and the mayor gets the approved minutes of our board meetings every month, and my mayor Iyer emails me back personally and says, I read every word, and he'll ask questions, and he has a project right now that he wants to do, and I said, okay, let me talk to my board, we'll help you move that along. So I think that then that email becomes easier, and where you can troubleshoot and talk about things that you can do. But I think really important, in my opinion, is finding out what they want to do and then help them move their projects forward, because there's always something. Like our mayor right now wants to do a history book to go into all the second graders, but we've gotta he wants it like a coloring book, and we've come back and said, let's do an activity book, and I've got the history board involved too. And so we're gonna create this whole little booklet that he's gonna fund, but we're creating for him. So it's kind of, I'll help you if you help me.
Yes, I think it's easy to agree with these two ladies. I always like the personal approach. It's just, I think having email just makes it so much nicer for us to have another avenue to communicate. But I don't like it as the sole place, because sometimes people just can't read what you're trying to say. I sent an email not too long ago, and one of my kids said, you know, are you mad at me? I mean, you just sometimes you can't hear the personality in it. But I'm going to give you, I think, a really important item here about approaching city staff. One, you have to remember who's got the power and who's been there the longest. Because when you're approaching the city, you need to know that the mayor has some influence, and particularly with the council, probably, depending on how new the mayor is and how much power the council feels they have. But the city manager, except for a few cities in Utah, there's 245 cities in Utah, and except for a handful, the mayors are not the ones who are running the city. It's the city manager. So having a good relationship with Gary in Bountiful is maybe more important than having a relationship with me. It's important that I'm positive, but Emma does a great job of making sure that she has not only those, but those people who are the longest on the council, they also have, you have to identify on the council, you're not trying to work against anybody, you wanna make sure you don't do that. But if it were on our council, it would be important to have a good relationship with Richard Higginson, who's been there the longest. And if you have his support, then you kind of got them all.
Good point. I'll interject something here. Kanab's a small community, and if you were to come up to me in the grocery store and say, hi, you know, by the way, I'm the president of the local whatever, and I want $500, I'll probably be, you know, first of all, I got my shopping list. Anyway, I learned something. It's like a mathematical axiom. You know what axioms are? Like Costco, it's $100 for every 15 minutes. We all know that, right? With relationships, if you're brand new to this, the first time you meet somebody, hi, my name's Nina. Didn't I see you? Yeah, okay, nice to meet you. The second time you see that person, yeah, didn't we meet at the change leader thing? Yeah, we sure did. The third time we met at change leader and the thing. Yeah, by the way, I'm involved in this, and I'd like to have your opinion. So the third time, they're going to remember you. The first time, they almost dismiss you. The second time, it's kind of recognition. The third time, you're building a relationship. So, not to say you shouldn't go up to anybody in the grocery store and say hi. Go ahead and say hi, but you don't give them your pitch until some other time. Build that relationship. Take those opportunities. It's good. Okay. Next question. Over here. Can you tell us how you sustain relationships with the local LAAs or city county governments? How you sustain those relationships? And this is a two-parter. And how often should you be in contact?
Well, I'm a little bit different than some organizations because I am the local arts agency, but I'm inside of the city, so I already have that connection. I think if you're, well, in either case, you're wanting to keep those interactions with whichever level, how you're organized, you're with them, and they're hearing what you're doing, whether, like for me, emailing my minutes to them so that they see what we're doing, and that you're involving them in the things so that they're really seeing what you're doing. Sometimes people say it's hard to get city council. People are busy trying to get them to your performances. But we actually twice a year do a formal presentation. We ask to be on the city council agenda twice a year to be in front of the city council formally, and sometimes we ask for the committee of the whole, which is a kind of more of a discussion, and they give you longer times. We'll ask to be on that agenda. and then kind of give them an overview of what we're doing, and very often ask it if there's something they would like us to do. We actually do that with even the school board, because we do a lot of, and I'll talk more about that later, but we do that in front of the school board once a year. But so we're I'd say a couple of times a year where you're in more of a formal thing, but for us, that monthly email out of what we're doing with the newsletter, and I'm sure, or in our board meetings, I'm sure some don't read it, but others do.
I think you said it. I go back to saying how important the city manager is in almost every city in Utah. And to sustain a relationship with arts, I think that relationship in most cases is number one, the city manager. And then secondly is taking advantage of people who are running for city council and making sure that before they ever start that you inform them so that they're educated to what's going on. And then when they're elected, they feel they're not asking for your vote, they're asking for information. When we're running for an office, we want to be educated, all of us, as to what and where we are, depending on our experiences we've had. So, you know, I feel a lot like Mary Ann in this regards.
We have invited, and some of the city, I was just thinking, he's the city, he's part of the city, something, Danny is on our board, so we have a connection that's there on the board. And we have invited some of them to sit on our grants award committee. So we get them involved in doing just little things that they can get involved in what we're doing throughout the year. But I think the biggest thing is to make sure that you don't disappear, to come in and make a big hoopla, this is what I'm doing, and then they don't see you for 6 months, they kind of forget about you. So I think whatever you do, it needs to be consistent. Like you were saying, that you mail out the minutes every month to everybody. They remember that you're there. So I think mostly, like you also mentioned, to support what they're doing, see what they're interested in, and just making that consistent communication back and forth.
That's good. You know, if you're, it's like being a good neighbor. You don't go to your neighbor, your next door neighbor at home, just when you need something. You certainly will have more than just a nodding acquaintance. You get involved, you know, maybe with the children or whatever, and it's just common sense. You want that relationship there, because if your house is burning, you don't want to, you know, you want somebody there that when you're away from home, you know, they'll be there for you. And you're right, you just don't disappear. If you're part of the community, in the arts community, you're part of other things, not just art, and so you sustain the relationship on many levels and take those opportunities, don't you? It's just common sense, certainly. Mayor, what strategies work best to get city and county leaders to pay more attention to the arts in my community?
So much of Davis County, so much of Bountiful is about economic development. And for us in Bountiful, we've been on a project now for a number of years to enhance Main Street. We have a unique Main Street that's kind of Old Town America. And so we love that. And I think the sustaining of our arts, bringing them to Main Street in Bountiful, having them in the right place with the right goals, it sustains us. It makes us so that it's part of the economic development that we have. When they were in Farmington, they saw, I think, 23,000 people last year. Is that correct, Emma? And they're expecting already now, even though we haven't officially opened, that this year the number projected would be more than 33,000 people. That brings down maybe 35,000 people to downtown Bountiful. Those people eat, and those people they spend time and do other things there. It affects our economic development.
We're involved with American for the Arts Economic Study that comes in every 4 years and looks at the economic study of the area. and gives a really nice publication. But I think it's really good to present that to the city council because it gives them hard numbers that they can see of what that actually brings into our community when people come down to the Shakespeare Festival, of course, is one of the biggest things in our area. But a lot of the other things that we do really makes an economic impact on our local area, and sometimes they just need to be reminded of how much we actually do bring to the community. You were talking about getting people to see the art. We're working with the tourism board to make a brochure of the art in our community, and that's just one of the ways to just kind of point it out to people and help them to see. Again, get them involved in kind of what you're doing. We have art walk on the last Friday of the month in the summertime that's right downtown in front of their offices. They can't miss it, so, you know, we just kind of make ourselves visible.
A couple of strategies. One of the key things when I first was hired by the city was to unify all of the arts organizations in our community, because a lot of times you have all different arts groups. You have a symphony and a band and a ballet and a this and a that and the visual arts, and it becomes very frustrating when all of those are coming at the city council asking for money. And sometimes it almost creates a conflict, and so they don't, that's not very comfortable from a city operational standpoint. And so one of my key things right up front was to unify the groups. We meet all of our local arts agents, all of our local cultural groups, and we do have a symphony, a band, a ballet, and we've had other various groups that have come in and out, and we meet 3 times a year. I pull them in with our Arts Advisory Board. They report on what they're doing. We talk about how we can help them. And then we just create a very unified approach to the city on funding needs. And so like we were able to go and say, you know, a lot of these groups need funding, so we created a granting process so that it was, you know, formally reviewed, and the Arts Advisory Board was reviewing those and then making recommendations. So it made it easier for the city council so that we didn't have infighting, and that's been a really strong plus. They saw us at a united front. And then that, because you created that kind of unified group, right now we're in the city master planning process. Every 10 years they do a whole city master plan, and so our arts community, I'll know to go to those public meetings and talk about some of our needs, facility needs, you know, other types of things that we can contribute up front on some of the long-term plans for the city, and so that they start seeing that that's important, and that is part of that whole the whole plan of the city, and that's been a really good strategy for us.
Oh, I was so ready.
Maybe I was listening, I was so mesmerized by you.
Yeah, I like that. It's almost as if you're leveraging your efforts, and that, I like that very much.
Well, maybe I haven't answered.
I didn't think you did.
Okay, I'll answer that. No, I think I was thinking about all the reasons for, you know, we have a wonderful place for art now on our main street. The BDAC is right in the center of our main street, and it isn't even officially open. The very first thing that they had was high school artists, and I think they opened it early just to do this before school ends. It was amazing. I couldn't believe the talent of the high schools in our area in Davis County. But it brought in that very first night over 300 people that came to visit and see those artistic things. But we also have theater, the Legacy Centerpoint Theater that's been a joint project with Bountiful in Centerville. We have chalk art that starts this week on the 13th, and I think I'm really happy about these rainstorms that we're having. Chalk doesn't seem to do very well, but these, you know, when we go back, we keep talking about relationships and strategies. Is last year after I was elected, Emma said, maybe it was me that told Emma, told Emma that I would dance with her at Summerfest. So after you danced with somebody in the street, you actually really are bonded. That's all I can say. Especially, is really we're bonded. So I just, you know, I like where we are, and everybody's excited about art and all of the subsidiaries of art in our area. So it really is exciting.
Wonderful, thank you. Debbie, I believe, I think I'm in sync here. Can you give other examples of other successful community-wide partnerships with your local agencies, like your libraries, or senior centers, your universities, or school districts?
When we pull together people that are on our board that represent the Arts Council, we make sure we have a good balance. On our board, we have people from SUU, from the school district, from the Shakespeare Festival, the orchestra, we have an art store and an art gallery. They're all represented, and we really try when we're looking for a new person to get on our board, we look to see maybe what area we might be weak in, if we need maybe somebody to represent dance or music or something. So we make sure, first off, that they're on the board, and then we have committees that specifically work with different people. We've got a literary committee that works with the library to get something going. We've got arts labs and education classes that work in conjunction with the school district and the kids. We've got, we're working on an art center for the community, so we're working with entities there to maybe get something going with that. But we target specific areas to make sure that we're trying to cover everything. When we started, and still, I think a lot of people think of the Arts Council as visual arts, as painting, but we're working really hard to make sure that we've got the music and the dance and the literary groups represented, and make sure that people understand that that's part of the art. Yeah.
And it's so interesting how you're differently organized, because we purposely don't have anybody from our local arts groups on our Arts Advisory Board, but we have all of the types of, you know, we have music, dance, theater, visual arts, and then we pull in the groups with us 3 times a year, because we know they're busy in their own little groups, and so we want them to focus on making theirs. So, you know, there are different scenarios that work just equally well. But what I have done, and it's pretty largely been me, because I'm within the city. I've been able to, but I think I could have done it without that, to go in and meet with the school district, and I go to their curriculum person and say, you know, what kinds of things are you lacking? Like, we did a huge survey of how all the teachers, the elementary school teachers, were teaching arts and education, the actual core curriculum. And we had them literally go by every single core curriculum concept and say if they were doing it in their classroom. And then from that, we were able to determine an area that was one of the areas that was weak. Well, they were weak all the way around, but we targeted an area, and we actually help fund music specialists in the school district. So the city gives the school district money. So, and then I use them when I'm doing a project that we want to help with the kids. I use the music specialists to help me with that. I've met with the senior center director, and she says, well, we'd like more concerts. So I said, okay, let's do our family concert series there. We do once a month family night concerts at the senior center. I pay for the musicians. She provides all the seniors, so I have an audience, but other people come too. And then the library, we do a big storytelling festival we've done for 3 years now. The library, caught on and provided the facilities, helped pump out publicity. And then a lot of times with like the Boys and Girls Club, they'll have something that they'll say, hey, I'd like to, one year we paid for a director for them to do a play at the Boys and Girls Club. So you just have to start thinking of your other agencies, and then figuring out, what do I have to offer, and what do you need, and what do I need? Because for me, half the time it's facilities. I don't have a facility in the wintertime. So how can I use the skills of our people and still engage my community in the arts by using your facilities?
Since I'm not the Arts Council, the Arts Council comes to us, but I'm going to give you 2 things for me at the end that I think are really, really important if you wanna have a really good relationship and a long-term relationship with your municipality. Put people on the board that help you have it be sustained over a long period of time. Like the previous mayor to me is now on the BDAC, Bountiful Davis Arts Center board. You know, that says a lot to a lot of people. So strategizing too on who is on the board and who's supported, those relationships are already established with the city and make it more long-term. The other thing is that when you ask for funds, when you come to the city and ask for funds, I think we have to think outside of our artistic brains, and we have to think in terms of being a CPA brain. That means you ask, you know how much it costs, you are very specific. You say, we need some new chairs, this is who makes them, this is how much they are, and then it's going to save you a lot of time, because if you just come and ask and you're unprepared, you're gonna be asked just like a school student. Go back and do your work and then come back and ask us again. And I really think those two things are really important strategies. Make sure what your board is made up of, and make sure that you're specific when you ask for funds.
Excellent.
We're working on number 7.
This is just, what are
Yes.
some key elements to long-lasting municipal or reciprocal partnerships?
Okay, I agree. I think one of the things is doing good business. I think that's a very important thing, and something that artists have a kind of a hard time doing. Last year we did a professional development series on business things for artists so that they could see how important they are. So I think just doing good business so people will kind of respect you as a vital entity is good. But I think we need to also, I mentioned time before, we need to realize that it takes a little bit of time, and we need to educate the other side of what we do. And if you're a good teacher, you realize that you can't just go barging in and saying something. You need to take the time, see where they're at, go from the places you're at and build that relationship. But you need to realize they don't understand what you're doing a lot of times. You need to tell them in a way that they can understand and see that it's important what you do.
Good. That concludes our questions. We'll have a Q&A here in just a minute. I wanna, there's been so much said about relationships, and if you're kind of new at this and you're a little reticent to build those relationships, it's time to get out of your comfort zone. And once you get a few successes, you'll be surprised at how good you are at it, because if you're passionate about what you do, and you probably are, it's gonna come easier than you think, okay? So we'll go ahead and we have plenty of time for Q&As, and I'll repeat your questions, not because you're inarticulate, it's because they're recording this and I've been asked to do that. There's no such thing as a dumb question, right?
Well, Debbie, you were talking a little bit about kind of proving what you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about what sort of metrics do you use? How do you prove, how do you show impact of the programs and projects that you do?
Great. How do you show impacts? And I suspect you mean, what's the bottom line? I'm going to improve your community by bringing tourists in, and they're going to spend money, or those kind of metrics. Is that important?
The biggest thing that we do is that American, the data study. They come in and do a data study, and it's real numbers that they've studied and researched and print in a, it shows right there what we do. But I think just going in and, like you mentioned, I think twice a year you go in and just tell about the numbers that you've impacted. We had this many school children came. We had this many people that we taught this, or this many people showed up on our art walks. We keep a lot of details whenever we do anything, because we want to be able to prove what we do. We show where our money is spent. We keep really accurate records. We've got some really good people on our board that take care of that stuff so that we can explain and show what we do.
Sometimes it's difficult to measure what kind of an impact your arts have on a community if you don't have a gate like a rodeo to find out how much income you have. And you'll have members on a municipality that will want, they're a numbers person, they want to know how much it's bringing in because they've got a fiduciary responsibility. And I honor that, I understand that. However, people don't think of their municipality as, in the term of public works, the roads and the rest of it, although that's important, they think of it more as a place and what's the feel and the spirit of the community. So that's why the arts are important, even though we can't measure that sometimes. So you have to sell it with the passion sometimes. But throw in some numbers too, because there's always one on the board that wants to hear those.
Well, and I think too, besides the numbers, which we do, I mean, we track, and sometimes it's estimates, we're just estimating how many people we have. But on occasion, we will do a survey, a patron survey, or if it's a classroom, and they're writing things down, and then we can provide, a lot of times we'll provide a summary. I do actually a monthly report to my boss with the numbers, but I also, a lot of times will include a comment, that you'll have a parent say, this was a life-changing experience for my child.
Excellent.
Or the emotional impact that I think, there are some that are, hung up on the dollar figure, but most people will respond to an emotional things, particularly at a local level. I think sometimes it's a little different at the legislature, they get hung up on the return on investment, but at a local level, that personal impact of how it's influenced, whether it's a child or an adult, they get it. I mean, they have their next door neighbor, like in a musical with ours, which is community theater, will have a person that's never been in a play before and happens to get a lead. We had that happen 2 years ago, and he was incredible. And that adult knew a city council person, and they were there and seeing that person having that experience, and that communicates a lot.
Good point. Sir.
Yeah, so I think that I work for a professional dance theater company, and in fact we're working with Mary Ann, I think right now, to try to do some work in your community, repertory dance theater. But my question is, there's sometimes a rift between the community arts programs and the professional artists groups. And I think one of the things that we struggle with as a professional group that's now approaching our 50th anniversary is that it seems like municipal groups and arts councils sometimes, okay, wait a minute, how do I say this delicately?
Oh, just say it.
We want to come to your community and perform because we're professional artists and we want to be valued for professional artists. And often we cannot charge the fee that we would to come into a smaller community, and that's fine. RDT is particularly good at working with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's sometimes a rift between the community arts councils and sometimes municipal governments that art is not a professional profession. And I think it's part of our Utah culture is that your talents are something that you should just give freely and with no charge. But one of the things that we are really trying to do, and I think other professional organizations would agree, is that we are trying to mentor to young people that there is a career out there for professional artists, and that we're part of the creatives community and the creatives economy. And so there's kind of a disconnect is all I'm saying. Yeah, we don't expect you to come down to the Rose Wagner all the time and see us doing our shows, but when we come out, there's a bit of a disconnect, I think, between the local arts council sometimes and the professional groups where we have an agenda and they have an agenda too, and I'm saying this so badly, but
Yeah, I'm trying to think how we'll,
Yeah.
next question. No, you're a for-profit organization, and you don't think you're relating to the nonprofit groups, and yet you have most definitely something to offer, maybe even career-wise, and how do you get together and make that work? That's a real good question.
I'd be happy to
Please.
say it from my standpoint. I hear it. I hear this actually personally because because we have, and we have the director of the Legacy Centerpoint Theater that's in Bountiful, the plays they put on there are amazing. But if the PMT at the University of Utah were to come out once a year or twice a year, there's a different level of acting, and it's supposed to be that way. We don't have the Actors Guild for the most part, I think, is that true, at the Centerpoint. I think sometimes there's a fear that if that comes to the community, that maybe we're gonna be disappointed, or fewer people are gonna want to see a lower talent level or a newer talent level. I think there's a little, I've heard this since I've been the mayor, just a little bit of fear of, we're at this level and we want in Davis County to be loyal. And so I think sometimes there's a fear of the professionalism. It's my take.
You're gonna probably say what I'm gonna say, aren't you?
We had RDT come out.
Hi, hey, nice to see you.
And
Thank you for doing that.
it was a fantastic opportunity for our students, and that's kind of the direction that we're going. Midvale has a very unique population, a lot of poverty, we have the homeless shelter, and so a lot of our students don't have those opportunities, and with, Common Core and all that stuff, the arts being cut, that's where we're trying to fill the gap, and I think there's an opportunity for us to maybe rethink how we're providing arts by collaborating with a professional company. That gives us credibility. We don't have to create this, magnificent piece of art, but we can go to the professionals and they can go into the schools and provide this great workshop. And by collaborating with other organizations, it just maximizes our resources.
I've seen that in Kanab, where the dance theater come out and work with the school and then actually include some of those students in the performance they give the community, and the community typically doesn't, in our community, Clive, you know how this is, it's just a little bit cheap. But if the kids are involved in it, and especially if you provide refreshments, they'll be there. So there are ways.
And can I say that I think both can happen. Neither the amateur or the professional organizations should be threatened. You both play a very vital role. I mean, community theater is important, and you're engaging your own constituents at they're not professionals. And so, but then you want that professional element to enhance what's going on. And so I think that it's really important that, and I think that one of the challenges with the professionals, quite frankly, is sometimes it is expensive, and so funding can become a problem of how do you pay for that. And then we were talking earlier today, you bring in this wonderful RDT, and you're afraid 70 people will show up. Not because they're not good, it's because people are going a bazillion spaces. Now that might not happen out in a rural area where people are just wanting that, but I mean in the Wasatch Front, where they're inundated, I mean you can go down, I mean from Murray, they could go down to the Rose Wagner, but we're bringing them out there, and there is a concern, okay, how will people support and come? So I think you have kind of a mix of complex issues, but with RDT this year for their 50th, we have created a very large project. They're going into every one of our elementary schools with either full-day residencies or in-depth choreographic residencies where the kids are creating pieces, and then they're going into our high school and our junior high, and then they're creating pieces, and then we're bringing the RDT for an assembly. We're busing all the kids in, and the 3 elementary schools that are doing intensive level, they're actually performing their pieces with RDT's assembly, and then they're doing a nighttime show, and our high school kids are going to be performing with them. So we'll bring some audience with that, but that's expensive to do, and so we use that, but I don't know how I do that without that. We have a funding element, a funding source there that's helpful for us, but that's you know, you've got both of those things happening. Now, we don't do that very often. I mean, this is once.
Couldn't do it every year, but once in a
Yeah,
while.
once every couple years, we do something that extensive, that we're bringing in a professional group.
Right, let's go in.
I was
Well-
just gonna say, we've been successful in partnering with, like, say, Plan B Theater to bring them in and go into the schools. They've already got the show, why should we reinvent the wheel? And we find that grants are open to that because you're partnering with someone else and it makes the money issue a lot easier. We've also found that bringing in professional actors to work with our community actors is a great mentoring program, and so we get a nice mix of professional actors and the community actors
Where
as well.
are you from?
We're Davis Arts Council, so like, yeah.
Okay.
So with a little bit of planning, it's very possible to make it work and make it work for the community as well as, the event. Well, first of all, Lenny back here.
If you're bringing in a performance that's already done, like if you're bringing in Plan B or you're bringing in RDT or Ryrie Woodbury, don't forget to apply for Utah Arts and Museums onstage funding that Jason has available that can cover up to half your artist fee. Don't forget that your presenters often and can do that.
Excellent, excellent.
Well, it can fund $2,000 or.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very, very, very important.
Yeah, so
Yes,
planning
there's
that,
a tap on it.
I was just going to add on in terms of a professional versus, I guess, amateur performing. I'm with Pioneer Theater Company, and for all of our productions, we do auditions for Utah residents as well as in New York. So, you know, there are some really great opportunities to, if you're a Utah resident and you audition for this play or this musical, to actually work with directors and actors that are professionals from New York or from around the country.
Great opportunity.
It doesn't have to be in conflict. It can provide opportunities for local people as well.
Excellent.
Nina, that also,
Well, the interesting thing, the idea of this conceptual kind of conflict, I think mostly plays from community folks, just that a lot of times community organizations are just scrambling. I mean, I think we could probably look at every community theater or program and say, well, are you ever overstaffed? Okay, and with the projects that are going on, the challenge that we have as artists is that we never want to do less, right? We always want to do more. And so what happens a lot of times is I think you'll get into these organizations or you try to do these partnerships and you'll get an organization that's just scrambling. And it's not that they don't want to, it's whether or not they feel like that they can with the resources, the manpower and that sort of thing that goes on. So it is a challenge and it is something that we have to work through. But I don't think that there's anybody anywhere that looks at, I think it's foolish anyway to look in what we looked at today, this group of people, and to think, oh my gosh, there's competition or there's levels of boy, we don't want them in our pie or anything like that. I think the challenge is that we're all doing so much and trying to do so much. Sometimes the time involved, the personnel available, funding, whatever the case may be, kind of puts a crimp in that whole idea of partnering throughout. I don't know if I speak for everybody, but that's what I find.
and they do a great job.
Well, it sounds like we're all calendar driven, aren't we? And if there's some redundancy in whatever it is you're offering to the community, you're not gonna get the kind of participation unless if you're the first one. That's an element, as far as your audience as well as your funding and creating partnerships.
I was gonna say that as well, that I never would have brought RDT in because they weren't on my radar unless, Rick had called me and said, hey, this is what we did in Holiday, can we do that in your community? Heck yeah. So I think, word of mouth, networking, all of that kind of stuff, revamping, the collaborating, the partnering, all of that is gonna help all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, understanding each other and getting the word out.
Probably, I'm thinking too, since I'm from southern Utah, part of it is back to the calendar again. If you're making a sweep through the state, you're not gonna go back down and come back up and go back down again. You're gonna try to hit those communities, so planning ahead and that type of thing is pretty common sense. Yes, Wendy?
This is a completely different topic, but I'm noticing something in my community that I wonder if anybody else is seeing. We're a city-owned facility that no longer receives any operational support from the city. So as a nonprofit, we don't own the space, but we have to pay to replace the roof. This is gonna be coming up, that's a real thing. And not only that, but the city has now decided that it is going to fundraise private funds for the new cemetery, for the new front of the cemetery, for their 4th of July celebration, and for the new rec center. So I now not only am competing with my landlord for funds, my landlord also can raise taxes, which I can't do, and people are more inclined to give to them because when they have their next building project up before the city, they're kind of hoping to get some little blush to rub off. So how do I approach my mayor and say, you're killing us?
Yeah, Mayor, would you like to answer that for
Your turn.
Well, that, you know, I would sure hope that you're able to talk to him and sit down and really say what you mean. I'm hoping that he's available, first of all, for you, and that you can say those things, because that, you know, it's just not how we operate, and so and that's not how we would operate with Arts in Bountiful, but and I won't even ask you what city you're in, but I think that, honestly, that, I don't know what you can do when the decisions are down at City Hall and they're not willing to cooperate. I think then you have to build a relationship over time. You have to be patient, and you have to strategize, sit down with those that you work with and say, how can we get this, not immediately, but we can get this over time and then work at it.
Right. You might ask them about community block grant funds, that type of thing, and they might be able to get some emergency funding for that type of thing. Yeah.
So, like Mayor Lewis was saying, the city of Bountiful is extremely supportive of the arts, and we realize that not all cities in Utah have that opportunity. Arts have that opportunity, and not all cities. But it took a long time to develop those relationships. Coming back to this, for years and years, maybe decades before we were able to realize that kind of support. And it's something that you have to keep maintaining over time. And like someone said earlier, if the mayor city council changes and you have a whole new dynamic, sometimes that's a challenge. We have been so fortunate because we haven't had that. We've had the last several mayors have all been extremely supportive, as well as the councils, and so that's been a very positive thing. I think it also makes a difference in the size of your city. Maybe we have more hands-on ability to, have developed those relationships on a regular basis. We interact a lot, don't we?
We really do.
So some cities that may not be possible, in some cities, but it's something to just keep working at it.
Well,
And if you haven't, to be so grateful, thank you.
Situations.
We need better than that.
One of the things I think we need to be careful of is we can't always assume that they know these things. A lot of times we need to just explain it to them. So, and in the way that you just said it here, how can I do this to let you know that you're killing us? They just might not recognize that.
Oh, no, they know.
Oh, well, okay. I'm trying to be positive here, okay.
They created an endowment to unload it, so,
Oh.
yeah. They know.
Yes, sir.
I just need some suggestions. I live in a community that has a large population base, no main street. We have 2 cash cows concerns. We have the Western Stampede, West Jordan, and soccer fields. We're an expanding community. We're the 4th largest population-based city in Utah, and we have everything. We have theater arts, we have visual arts, we have a symphony, we have a band. We have no place to perform. We've been trying to get a arts center for 25 years, and we've been getting promises, we get a mayor that's super into the arts and a council, and then they get reelected, they don't get reelected, and we get a mayor who is, well, who is against it. We spent thousands of dollars on feasibility. We had an old sugar house factory, and it's very historic, that we were gonna revamp. And it was gonna be a restaurant, it was gonna be arts, everything, and we spent $1,000 on a feasibility study. The new mayor came in and shot the whole thing down after spending all that money. Now we have a mayor that's pro-art, and half of our city council are pro-art, and half of them are, I would say, not anti, but very cautious. And so they gave us the old library, the Salt Lake City Library, which is not a very adequate building. And they say, well, we're gonna sell this, but it's years down the line. You can use it. Basically, the theater people are got they're practicing in there. We usually rent a hall to perform. And so we're sort of like in a quandary, because I've been in the Arts Council for 2 terms, the last 15 years or so, and I'm hearing the same promises, and we don't know what to do.
Right,
Very aggravating.
I'll let the mayor respond to this again, but really, when you're looking at a big ticket item like this, you're talking money, and the only way to really get the money is a bond issue, and then pay it back over time. In other words, take it to your taxpayers, and
Well, we do have this. The library has been appraised at $1.25 million, and according to the people at the city hall, the money goes to the city, and the city will determine whether it's going to go to the arts. And
well, it's
there's
a
no soccer
possibility.
fields going up.
Yeah, there's a possibility to leverage that, but true. Otherwise, it's just gonna. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, we're in the same boat for the last 25 years, but what I have had to do, I have approached it a few other ways. We, actually, they were building a new junior high school, and so I approached the school district and said, if I help you, with some money, significant money, will you add us a little theater and storage space for our symphony, and so they did. Now that's brand new this coming year. We'll see. We have a contract on how much we have access to that. But I think beyond that, you have to figure out programming that you can do with the facilities that you do have. I have to resort to that because we were trying to get a performing arts center that fell down, and it's still, the county's still arguing over whether it's going to be Taylorsville or Murray, and that still may happen, but it won't, you'll have to rent it. But I think that realistically, you just have to figure out what you have, where you're at, unless you think you can pass a bond. But it's pretty, our city council was like, well, yes.
Well, it's scary to them because no elected official wants to raise taxes. Another thing, if you were so fortunate to get a facility, then you've got the maintenance and utilities and all that. So the fact that you've gotten a space, sure, you've got to share it. That makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, so you have to figure out another programming. Like I do every 3 years, we do after-school musicals at every single elementary school, and we pay for it, and the schools provide the facility, and so all the kids are in place, and sometimes it involves adults with them. We're finishing up that this week. So you have to figure out programming that where you can maneuver a facility.
Well, we've done that, and working with the Georgia School District, when we go to a school and their law is saying, well, you have to hire our lighting person, even though we have trained lighting persons.
Yes.
Thing. And so it gets to be financially, you don't make any money doing your plays, and so it's just kind of aggravating.
It's a problem that we all have.
It's really difficult. We're in a situation where we weren't this situation, even though I'm a fairly new mayor. We weren't in this situation. We were more in this situation 10 years ago than where we are now, because now the city bought the building in downtown Bountiful because we knew that it was a perfect building for art. When you get the chance to come to Bountiful, you will just be amazed at how this turned out. A little divine providence on buying that property. But Emma and her group, she can show that they can sustain themselves. we sustained them to here and they can sustain the rest. It's not that we don't give them some of our RAP tax. I mean, we passed a RAP tax, so we have we have that Parks and Recreation and Art tax, just like the ZAP tax basically in Salt Lake. That really helps. You know, you've got to have the funding from somewhere. So, you know, we're at a point now, but I don't think we were there 10 years ago, were we, Emma? We weren't. And so I think patience is part of it. And you know what? You people are inventors. And I mean it. That's what you do. That's why you're here, is because you're a lot better than me. You can figure out some other way to get whatever you need to get done, even though it might take a bit of time.
I call it the evolution of a community, because if you look back seriously where you were 10 years ago, you'll probably figure that you actually came a lot further than you remember. And you just have to keep going because you've got vision.
I agree.
I think that about wraps it up. I want to thank our panelists for such an excellent job. Yeah, but I grew up in Bountiful, farming, so